There's a lot of controversy about whether or not you should be sharing your experience of narcissistic abuse, and especially if you are still in the court system with the narcissist. And today I wanted to take some time and kind of explore this topic with you and find out the positives and potential negatives of sharing your story. So first of all, I think it's very important that we understand that when we share our stories about narcissistic abuse, we help to break through this shield of silence and isolation that so many survivors feel. You're helping to raise awareness about this type of abuse, which is often misunderstood or even minimized. Especially if your abuse wasn't necessarily physically or sexually violent, it can feel like it's not really abuse. That's the running narrative that we have to compete with right now. By sharing your story, you are helping to tear down the narrative that abuse is only abuse if it's physical or violent physically in nature. You're also helping to give other people hope and courage. You're helping to bring clarity to what they are experiencing. And you're also helping to create a sense of community, which is essential for healing. Additionally, when you share your story, you are helping to dismantle the power of the narcissist. The narcissist always seeks to silence you because they know that there is so much power and truth contained in your voice. So when you share your story, you dismantle the power of the narcissist, you take back your power, and you assert your right to be seen and heard. You also set an example for your children to speak out about abuse or situations where they are being marginalized. In short, sharing your story about your experience with narcissistic abuse is an essential part of your recovery, but it also aids in the healing and recovery of so many others. For me personally, when I started to share my story about my personal experience with narcissistic abuse, I was validated by hearing the experience of others because they had been through something similar. It was so easy for me to feel like I was the only one experiencing this type of abuse because I had never heard about it. I've never been around somebody who had experienced what I was experiencing, and especially bringing court into it. I was not aware of the systemic abuse happening in family court either. So when I heard other people share their stories with me, it helped me to realize that I was not alone and that something needed to be done about the situation. So it not only helped to break the silence, but also the stigma around this type of abuse, of making me feel like I was so isolated, I was the only one experiencing this abuse, that maybe I was the crazy one, that I was the narcissist. So you sharing your stories can also give other survivors the courage to speak out and to get help for their situation. Because we all know that narcissists gaslight their victims and they make them doubt their own experiences. When you share your story with others, it not only helps you to concrete your reality to make it permanent, but it also helps others put back the pieces of their lives that have been scattered by the narcissist. So if you have been silent about what has happened to you, sharing your story can be a very powerful act of recovery for yourself. One thing that I think is also very important for people to realize is that the more you become healed, the more you have accepted that I'm not going to try to cover up or ignore or pretend this part of my life didn't happen, but rather I'm ready to embrace it. I'm ready to say this is a part of me. This is a part of my experience. It doesn't need to define me, but I'm not going to pretend it never happened. I'm not going to wish it away. When we start to do that, and we become whole, we become reconciled to ourselves, we have an understanding of what we've gone through, it becomes an act of betrayal to remain silent when you have a part of yourself that, number one, you've just now accepted. You've just now realized you were rejecting. But it also becomes an act of betrayal to yourself when you don't allow other people to experience that part of you, to know that part of you as well. If you still feel like you need to hide that part of you from other people, like I know it happened, but I'm not going to share it with other people, that itself is an act of betrayal. Your story needs to be heard by you at the very least. You need to be comfortable sharing your story with yourself first, and then sharing your story with a group of people that you definitely trust, that you know you're safe with, and that you know would want to hear and accept your story, no matter how painful it is to hear. One of the things that helped me so much recover from narcissistic abuse, and one of the things that I encourage all people to start doing, is to keep a journal, because oftentimes when you're in the gaslighting phase, you do start to question your reality. You do start to question whether or not you actually experienced the things you're saying you experienced. And when you go back and you read your journals and you read the entries of what was happening, of the things that were said to you, of the experiences and feelings you were having during these times, it can really start to show you how dark of a place you were really in, and the even more increased need to bring light to those spaces. The trauma bond is not one that is easily broken, and unless light comes into that darkness, right? Unless light comes in and shows people how you are being manipulated, how you are being controlled, how you are being gaslit, how you are being hooked on this narrative that the narcissist is the only one for you, that this is what you deserve, this type of life you are living is what is the best you could ever hope for. Your voice could be the light that turns on this light bulb that says, I don't need to accept this. Your story could essentially be the key that sets somebody else free of this prison of abuse. The decision to share your story about narcissistic abuse, of course, is not an easy one. You are essentially exposing the most vulnerable parts of you and allowing other people to see these places that were deeply wounded. On the other hand, you probably feel like you do need to warn other people about the narcissist in not only your life, but the fact that narcissists exist in general. But maybe you're also worried about how you will be perceived. And if you're struggling with this decision, I want you to consider a few things. First, it's important to remember that narcissists are master manipulators. They are experts at making their victims feel ashamed and embarrassed as a result of things that they have done. So remember to not give your power away. The narcissist should not be allowed to control the narrative. This is your story to tell, and you have the right to share it however you see fit. Also, you are free to share your story without giving specifics. You don't need to outright name your narcissist when you are sharing your story. Just because the narcissist is a part of your story does not mean that they need to be the focal point of the way that you share your story. Second, understand that narcissists often have a hold over their victims through the trauma bond long after somebody has been separated from the narcissist. So you could be thinking, it's been years, there's no way I'm still trauma bonded. But unless you've gone through systemic and very deliberate healing and recovery, that trauma bond can often still exist at very deep rooted levels, where you believe something thinking that that's your belief, not understanding that that's a result of having the trauma bond. The trauma bond, of course, is formed when a victim experiences repeated trauma at the hands of the abuser, and as a result, the victim begins to believe that they deserve the abuse, or that this is not abusive at all, that this is a normal situation. So if you find yourself in this situation, even as I'm talking, it's important to remember that you are not responsible for somebody else's actions. You are not responsible for the narcissist's actions, no matter what they say, and that nobody deserves to be treated that way. As I said, sharing your story is an important part of your own recovery process. And in fact, I would go so far to say you're not fully healed until you can actually tell your story. If you decide to share your story, I encourage you to do it in a way that feels comfortable for you, especially when you are starting. The most important thing is that you are owning this step in your healing and recovery journey. No matter how many stories of narcissistic abuse recovery you have heard, or even about the abuse itself, it can still feel like you're the only one who's ever experienced it when you're telling your story, because it's your story and your story hasn't been told before. So that can be scary, right? You can be worried about how the narcissist will retaliate if you speak out. But it is important to remember that you are not alone, and your story, while different and while it needs to be heard, is no different than the experience that everybody else has already gone through when they've told their stories. There's others who have been through this type of abuse. There are others who've shared their story, and it's important to remember that you aren't alone, even when it feels like you are. Again, recovery is possible, but it does take time and effort. It means that you're going to have to go against the things that you firmly believe. Those beliefs may not be your own, and they may not be serving you. So if you're ready to take the first steps, I want to give you a few tips on how to start sharing your story. First of all, like I said, I want you to start sharing your story in a safe place. This can be just with a single friend, with a family member, with your therapist or a support group, but it's important where you feel you can be heard without fear or of retaliation from the narcissist when you first begin. And even before you start sharing your story with somebody else, hear your voice. Allow yourself to feel and connect with the words that you are saying about your own experience. You need to accept your reality before you can share it with other people and expect them to accept it. If you are still at the part where you are not quite sure that you are ready to accept that this is part of your story, then there's still work that needs to be done individually there. Again, when we experience narcissistic abuse, it can feel like everything is now black and white. It's either this or that. It's right or wrong. It's all in or all out. But I want to encourage you that that also is a way of thinking that the narcissist has trained you to think, right? Because it's either their way or the highway. You either do what they say or you're going to suffer the consequences. But you don't need to share your story all at once, all at one time. You can share small pieces of your story. Start by sharing the parts of your story that feel safe for you to share. And as you build trust, as you feel more comfortable, you can share more and more of it as you go. I also want you to be prepared for triggers. Understand that sharing your story is a healing process, so that means you are going to have to confront deeply rooted beliefs, emotions, memories that you may have even forgotten about. Sharing your story can be triggering, so it's important to be prepared for that possibility when you share. So have a plan in place for how you will deal with triggers if they arise. Remember that you are safe in the moment. Connect back with yourself in the moment. If you find yourself welling up with emotion, remember that you aren't in the past, you aren't experiencing those things anymore. You are now here, you're safe, you are physically safe, you are emotionally safe, you are mentally safe. Gather your thoughts and then continue as it feels safe and comfortable for you. Another thing you can do is to reach out and seek support from those who understand, those who have already gone through the process of sharing their story. Again, there are other people who have already gone through this, who have already shared their story publicly, and they understand what you're going through. Connecting with them can help you to feel less alone and to give you the support that you need to heal. One of the things that I've noticed from narcissistic abuse happening is that victims feel they need to do it all on their own, that they'll figure it out on their own. And number one, that isn't true. And number two, while you may be able to, you don't have to. There's an easier way to do things, and you deserve to invest in yourself, to allow yourself to be seen by others and heard by others, and to have the support, the weight taken off of your back. You don't need to do it all on your own. So I encourage you to reach out to others who have already experienced the thing you are about to do. Finally, I do want to address the real concern that the narcissist will retaliate if you start sharing your story. Maybe they've threatened you before on this very topic. They've made it clear that they will do whatever it takes to punish you if you start talking about what they did. But you know you're tired of being silenced, and they can no longer have that control over your life. You can no longer operate and make decisions out of fear. You're tired of carrying the weight of the truth by yourself. You're tired of feeling like you have to protect the narcissist at the expense of your own well-being or your children's well-being. So it's time to start sharing your story, even if you're scared, even if you're unsure of how the narcissist will react. Maybe the narcissist will try to gaslight you. Maybe they'll try to do a smear campaign against your reputation or try to isolate you from your support system. But you don't have to let them silence you. Those things are their behavior. They are in control of their behavior. You are in control of your behavior. You can use your voice to start speaking your truth and truly begin your journey toward recovery. If you need help with this and you're ready to truly take the steps to fully recover from narcissistic abuse, I want you to text the word detox to 512-677-9322. Let's see if you qualify to join my Narcissistic Abuse Intensive and join the hundreds of others that have already recovered from this type of abuse. And if you're still struggling with staying with the narcissist and debating about whether or not you should leave the narcissist, I want you to check out this video, which covers the 5 most common false beliefs that people tell themselves on why they need to stay with the narcissist. And I will see you in the next video.